You can also see here what not to do. The next graph is a pie chart, and you can see that that's pretty ugly. It's not telling you as much information as you'd like it to tell, because you physically find it very difficult to compare the volumes of the slices of the pie chart. And so what we're going to do in the next set of presentations is to walk through many of the different design choices that you have and talk through the pluses and minuses of each. So now what we're going to do is talk a little bit about design choices. Now, as we talked about before, there was a lot that could be done with color and hue and markers and channels and so on. But I want to focus more on conveying concepts simply and easily with minimal junk and focusing in on the key messages. So I'm going to take kind of a set of concepts that are fundamentally fairly dynamic, and then show how people have thought hard about how to convey those concepts in a simple manner. So the first picture I'm going to show, the first graph that I'm going to show, is a picture that was actually quite high impact from one of the classes that we taught. So just to set the stage, the problem that they were trying to address in the class was, what is the impact of neighborhood characteristics and access to jobs on the earnings and employment outcomes of ex-offenders and their subsequent earnings and employment outcomes and their subsequent recidivism. And so the team thought long and hard, all of the teams did. When you're dealing with a dynamic information, administrative records on earnings and employment, how can you summarize the information in a very simple way? Now, of course, the challenge here is that when you have survey data, you kind of have a point in time. Were you employed in the 12th day, in the week that houses the 12th day of the month? When you're dealing with administrative data, you observe all jobs in a given quarter. You don't know when they start or when they end. You don't know what the transitions are over time and so on. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to convey that inherent dynamism in a very clear way. And this picture I love, because what they were able to do, instead of saying employment 01, what they did was they said, let's look at ex-offenders in the quarter of release and then see, were they employed in any of the 8 subsequent quarters. And that picture summarizes it beautifully, because what it does is that the white represents not employed, the blue represents employed, and you see just at an immediate glance that the most common employment pattern of an ex-offender is that they never have a job in the 8 quarters afterwards. And this really was something that the Director of Corrections, John Baldwin, Director Baldwin, took to heart, because then he said, I had no idea that the patterns of employment were so striking. So there was one picture that told 1,000 words, and I think it's quite powerful. The second picture that I'm going to show is also trying to show dynamics, but it uses something called a Sankey picture or flow picture. And what that does is it answers the question, and this is just a screenshot from the LEHD program at the Census Bureau, and it says, for a group of people in Illinois in a given quarter, what are their job-to-job flows? How many of them move to the contiguous states? So you've got a picture of their employment in one quarter, and you want to say how many of them are going to be in a different state, a different contiguous state in the subsequent quarter. And if you take a look at this, a lot of them end up in Indiana, a lot of them end up in Wisconsin, Missouri, Michigan, Kentucky. And the nice thing there is the flow is captured both in the size of the bar chart at the end and then you have a visual that conveys that flow. So Sankey charts are a very, very powerful way of conveying dynamics and flows from one state to another state. The next picture takes a bit more unpacking, but again, this is trying to show dynamics. And so, very, very simple picture when you look at it, but then when you start to unpack it, there's a lot of information in there. So essentially, what I like about this is it talks about income growth over the past 34 years. So if you take a look, it compares income growth, so that's on the left-hand side, from 1980 and in 2014. And what's interesting here is the mix of the actual data and then the text. So you don't just have to expect your reader to be able to figure out the storyline from the numbers and the plot. You can actually tell the story. So let's take a look and see what what is being conveyed here. So if you look at income growth, at the bottom it's got the income percentile, and they even have little signs that say lower income this way, higher income that way. That's a nice little flag for people to understand. And then when you take a look at it, what you see very clearly is that in 1980, the lowest income percentiles had the highest percentage growth. That's kind of expected. When you have a low base, the percentage growth is usually not a big dollar amount, but you can see it's monotonically decreasing. The highest income growth is for the lowest income people, the lowest income growth is for the highest income people. Now what's striking is in 2014, that income growth completely switched. So the story is told in a very compelling way. Here, by 2014, the lowest income people, the people in the lowest percentile, had the lowest income growth. And the highest income people, the people at the far end of the graph, have a very high income growth. So the authors of this have made a very compelling story just by drawing two lines, and they make the point because you can see at the left-hand side, they even tell you in words what's going on. They say the poor and middle class used to see the largest income growth, and then they say, but now the very affluent see the largest income growth. So you see the visual, and it's also being spelled out for you in words. If you'll notice, here, even though in some sense the color is redundant, because you don't need the color to differentiate the two lines, what they're using there is, it's almost an exclamation point. So it makes it quite striking, it pops out at you. So it took them a lot of time to design that picture, and you can see the payoff in it. So this next picture is, this is kind of a matter of taste. This is a radial chart, and you can see that there is an effusive amount of color. The color here is very much talk about gay pride and gay rights in the United States. And what they're doing is they've identified the key characteristics that the newspaper, The Guardian, is saying emblematic of gay rights: marriage rights, hospital visits, adoption, employment, housing, hate crimes in schools, and so on. And then they're shading the states by whether or not that's okay in those states. And the color choice here, the hue is picking up that gay rights are strong. When it's light, it means that gay rights are not as strong. So you can see the way in which the hue has been used to convey something about the strength and the level of gay rights. You can also see how the use of multiple pieces of information comes in, and you can see immediately in the Northeast, gay rights are stronger than in the southeast, where gay rights are less. Now, you could nitpick a bit on this, because obviously one of the things that there's no reason for those different colours other than it spells out the gay flag. The actual volume isn't conveying any information, because you know, you've got marriage that shows up more importantly in some sense than schools, and there's no reason for that that volume to be conveying any information. So if you're a purist, this is probably not a very purist approach to conveying information, but this is for a newspaper. It makes the point. You get the thing, they get the idea right away. So as you can see, this is more of an art and a science. It's taste. If you're a pure tufty person, you're going to say this is overkill. But if you're a newspaper reading, you can say, oh, well, that's kind of a cute thing. I understand what's going on. So obviously, there's a lot that we could talk about here. People write dissertations on this. Visualization science is a very deep and important field. We provided a very small selection of websites. We hope that we've conveyed how interesting and how important this is. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. You know, I'm an academic, so I'm going to disagree with that statement, but certainly visualizations can enhance 1,000 words in many important ways.